Through Time into Healing by Dr. Brian L. Weiss. For those of you who have not listened to Dr. Weiss's first tape, Many Lives, Many Masters, a few words of explanation are necessary. Dr. Weiss was graduated magna cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa, from Columbia University, and received his medical degree from the Yale University School of Medicine, where he was also chief resident in psychiatry. Dr. Weiss has been a professor at several prestigious university medical schools and has published over 40 scientific papers in the fields of psychopharmacology, brain chemistry, sleep disorders, depression, anxiety states, substance abuse disorders, and Alzheimer's disease. Catherine, the patient he discusses in Many Lives, Many Masters, was referred to Dr. Weiss about a year after he became chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at Mount Sinai Medical Center in Miami Beach, Florida.
At the time, I knew nothing about the concept of past lives or reincarnation, nor did I want to. Catherine was suffering from fears, phobias, paralyzing panic attacks, depression, and recurrent nightmares. Her symptoms had been lifelong and were now worsening. After more than a year of conventional psychotherapy, she remained severely impaired. I felt she should have been more improved at the end of that time span. Catherine was a laboratory technician in the hospital and had the intelligence and insight to gain from therapy. There was nothing in her basic makeup to suggest that her case would be a difficult one. Since she had a chronic fear of gagging and choking, she refused all medications. I couldn't prescribe antidepressants or tranquilizers, drugs I was trained to use to treat symptoms like hers. Her refusal turned out to be a blessing in disguise, although I did not realize it at the time. Eventually, Catherine consented to try hypnosis, a form of focused concentration, to remember back to her childhood and attempt to find the repressed or forgotten traumas which I felt must be causing her current symptoms. Catherine was able to enter a deep hypnotic trance state. She began to remember events which she consciously had been unable to recall. She remembered being pushed from a diving board and choking while in the water. She also recalled being frightened by the gas mask placed on her face in a dentist's office. And worst of all, Catherine remembered being fondled by her alcoholic father when she was 3 years old, his huge hand held over her mouth to keep her quiet. I was certain that now we had the answers. I was equally certain that now she would get better. But her symptoms remained severe. I was very surprised. I had expected more of a response. As I pondered this stalemate, I concluded that there must be more traumas still buried in her subconscious. If her father had fondled her when she was 3, perhaps he had done this at an even earlier age. We would try again. The next week, I once again hypnotized Catherine to a deep level. But this time, I inadvertently gave her an open-ended, non-directive instruction. I suggested that she go back to the time from which her symptoms arose. I had expected her to return once again to her early childhood. Instead, she flipped back about 4,000 years into an ancient Near Eastern lifetime, one in which she had a different face and body, different hair, a different name. She remembered details of topography, clothes, and everyday items from that time. She recalled events in that lifetime until ultimately she drowned in a flood or tidal wave as her baby was torn from her arms by the force of the water. During this hypnosis session, Catherine remembered 2 other lifetimes. In one, she was a Spanish prostitute in the 18th century. In another, a Greek woman who had lived a few hundred years after the Near Eastern lifetime. I was shocked and skeptical. I had hypnotized hundreds of patients over the years, but this had never happened before. I had come to know Catherine well over the course of more than a year of intensive psychotherapy. I knew that she was not psychotic. She did not hallucinate or have multiple personalities. Catherine wasn't particularly suggestible and did not abuse drugs or alcohol. I concluded that her memories must have consisted of fantasy or dreamlike material. But something very unusual happened. Catherine's symptoms began to improve dramatically, and I knew that fantasy or dreamlike material would not lead to such a fast and complete clinical cure. Week by week, her formerly intractable symptoms disappeared as, under hypnosis, she remembered more past lives. Within a few months, this young woman was totally cured, without the use of any medicines. My considerable skepticism was gradually eroding. During the 4th or 5th session, something even stranger had transpired. After reliving a death in an ancient lifetime, Catherine floated above her body and was drawn to the familiar spiritual light she always encountered in the in-between lifetime state. She spoke to me in a husky voice, quite different from her own. She said, "There are many gods, for God is in each of us." And then she completely changed the rest of my life with these words. "Your father is here," she said, "and your son, who is a small child. Your father says you will know him because his name is Avram, and your daughter is named after him. Also, his death was due to his heart." She continued to speak, and said that my son's heart was also important, for it was backward like a chicken's. She told me he made a great sacrifice for me out of his love. "His soul is very advanced," she said, still in that husky voice, "and his death satisfied his parents' debts. Also, he wanted to show you that medicine could only go so far, that its scope is very limited." Catherine stopped speaking then, and I sat in an awed silence as my numbed mind tried to sort things out. The room felt icy cold. Catherine knew very little about my personal life. She really knew me only as a psychiatrist. She had no idea that the greatest tragedy in my life had been the unexpected death of our firstborn son Adam, who was only 23 days old when he died early in 1971 from a heart problem. It was as if his heart were turned around, backward. Extremely, extremely rare. We mourned for months, our hopes and dreams dashed. At the time of Adam's death, I had been wavering about my earlier choice of psychiatry as a career. I was enjoying my internship in internal medicine, and I had been offered a residency position in medicine. After Adam's death, I firmly decided that I would make psychiatry my profession. I was angry that modern medicine, with all of its advanced skills and technology, could not save my son, this simple, tiny baby. My father had been in excellent health until he experienced a massive heart attack early in 1979 at the age of 61. He survived the initial attack, but his heart wall had been irretrievably damaged, and he died 3 days later. 4 months after his death, our daughter Amy was born. She was named after him. His Hebrew name, Avram, had suited him better than Alvin, his English name. This was about 9 months before Catherine's first appointment. She could not possibly know this information. This unsophisticated laboratory technician was a conduit for transcendental knowledge, and if she could reveal these truths, I wondered what else was there. I needed to know more. I asked her who told her these things, and she responded in a whisper, saying that the Master Spirit told her. After the shock subsided, I returned to the behavior of an obsessive-compulsive, scientifically trained psychiatrist. I scoured the libraries and bookstores for more information. I found some excellent work, such as Dr. Ian Stevenson's research with young children who have demonstrated reincarnational-type memories. I also found a few published studies of clinicians who had used past-life regression. They used hypnosis and other related techniques that allow the patient's subconscious mind to go back in time to retrieve memories from prior lifetimes. After my experience with Catherine, my perspective on psychotherapy began to change radically. I realized that past-life therapy offered a rapid method of treating psychiatric symptoms that had previously taken many months or years of costly therapy to alleviate. Here was a much more direct way to heal pain and fear. I began to use this therapy on other patients, and again had excellent results. At the time of this taping, I have regressed hundreds of patients to past lives during their individual therapy sessions. I have regressed many times that in group workshops. Who are my patients? They are physicians, attorneys, business executives, other therapists, housewives, blue-collar workers, salespersons, and so on. They are people from different religions, socioeconomic levels, educational backgrounds, and belief systems. Yet many of them have been able to remember details from other lifetimes, and many of them have been able to remember survival after physical death. Catherine, whose story is described in complete detail in Many Lives, Many Masters, traversed a dozen of her lifetimes, and she was cured. She continues to lead a happier, more joyful life, freed from her paralyzing symptoms and from her pervasive fear of death. She knows that a part of her, containing her memory and personality and yet possessing a far greater perspective than her conscious mind, will survive her physical death. Most of my patients experience past life regressions through hypnosis. Many were able to rid themselves of chronic lifelong symptoms, such as specific phobias, panic attacks, recurrent nightmares, unexplained fears, obesity, repeated destructive relationships, physical pain and illness, and so on. This is not a placebo effect. Generally, these are not people who are gullible or suggestible. They remember names, dates, geography, details. And after they remember, like Catherine, they become cured. Perhaps even more important than the curing of specific physical and emotional symptoms is the knowledge that we do not die when our bodies do. We are immortal. We do survive physical death. Through Time into Healing chronicles what I have learned about the healing potential of past life regression since Many Lives, Many Masters was completed. The case histories are all true. Only the names and identifying information have been altered. These adventures are truly amazing. Please listen and join the journey.
Dr. Weiss was a guest on a radio talk show in Cleveland. Listeners called in from their homes, offices, car phones, and pay phones. Many of them were very supportive as they shared their personal experiences on the air. Others were less kind.
One lady was very angry. "Didn't I know it was a sin?" she asked. I assumed that she was referring to the concept of reincarnation. She wasn't. She went on to explain that hypnosis was a sin, Jesus said so, and devils could enter your body. I knew that Jesus had not said anything about hypnosis. The word hadn't been in usage then. Hypnosis wasn't used as a therapeutic tool until at least the 18th century, around the time of Mesmer. However, I do take every question and comment seriously. Perhaps she was referring to some similar state of altered consciousness or focused concentration. I thought for a moment or two, and then asked her why, if hypnosis was a sin, the Archdiocese of Miami had sent us priests, nuns, and employees to stop smoking, lose weight, or lessen stress. The woman was silent for a few seconds as she pondered this new piece of information. Then she spoke up again, without conceding an inch. Well, she didn't know about Miami, she declared, but it was a sin in Cleveland. The show's host looked at me, barely suppressing a laugh. We had just been introduced to the concept of regional sin. But why was this woman so angry? She was afraid because the idea of hypnosis was a new one for her, and it had threatened her concept of the way things ought to be. It had challenged her view of reality and her understanding of the world. This story always gets a big laugh, but some of that laughter is the laughter of self-recognition. It is the recognition of having one's view of reality challenged by a new idea. And that idea might turn out to be a very important one. In fact, probably all of us have come up against at least one such concept in our lifetime.
History is the best teacher of the growth that can be gained if we overcome our fear of new ideas. Some of them have opened up new paths in science, economics, politics, and the arts. Some new ideas have access to new geographies and remapped space. Ideas have greatly expanded the boundaries of what our ancestors could achieve, feel, know, and understand. In 1633, Galileo was tried by the Inquisition for proposing that the Earth rotated on its own axis around the sun. Heresy, said the Church, and Galileo was locked up in a tower. In order to be released, this brilliant scientist had to recant. Only then was he set free. Isaac Newton, who was born on the day of Galileo's death, availed himself of his countryman's work to develop his own theory of a mechanistic universe. A universe that worked through physical forces without divine intervention. Newton's work was accepted, and humanity's perception of the workings of the universe was forever changed. Despite the Church's best efforts, Galileo's work was also eventually accepted and highly praised. Today, every school child reads about him not only because of the importance of his scientific work, but also for the way he demonstrated that people find the truth by going within and trusting their own thoughts and experiences. Galileo did not rely on what other people told him was true. The lesson for some people is to open up to truth and love. Anita was a 42-year-old housewife from a strong Italian Catholic cultural and religious background. When she went to see Dr. Weiss, she was extremely depressed and taking medication for it. She exhibited the usual symptoms of clinical depression, a condition that usually indicates a feeling of powerlessness, and that word certainly described Anita. She felt oppressed by her family and her ritualistically religious background. These two forces seemed to dictate her role in life. She resented the limitations made by her father's demands on her life. At the same time, she felt guilty about her own anger. She was afraid that if she challenged his treatment of her, she would no longer be able to consider herself a good Catholic. Because Anita was a deeply religious woman, the prospect of rejecting or distancing herself from God in any way was extremely distressing. The strain between her need for her religion and her desire to fulfill her own needs had created a psychological trigger for an inherited biological predisposition toward depression. This was exacerbated by her relationship with her father. On top of that, Anita was very concerned that her religion did not accept reincarnation, a concept she believed in quite strongly. This is what had brought her to Dr. Weiss's office.
Although I had no specific expectations for the session, it would not have been unusual for Anita to have entered a lifetime that addressed power. However, as we began the regression, an unusual thing happened. When she opened the door to the past, she did not enter a past life. Instead, she went to a place that seemed to be in between lives. It appeared to be a garden-like place, filled with much wisdom. It pulsed with purple and golden light, and was filled with many wise guides. Suddenly, from that place, this withdrawn and deferential woman began to teach me profound truths about love and wisdom. Anita calmly advised me that when I wanted to comfort someone, I shouldn't listen to their words because the words might be wrong or misleading. Go straight to their hearts, she told me. She said that their words might be pushing me away, but that they still needed comforting. When I heard these words, I was amused. Other patients, accessing a similar place, had echoed these same thoughts. Now this woman, who was not a scholar, a philosopher, nor a psychologist, was teaching me something very important about human nature. She went on to utter a beautiful thought fragment that was very close to a classic esoteric definition of wisdom. It involved the blending of the mind and the heart to establish harmony and balance. Here was a woman who, without any background or training in this philosophy, had spontaneously begun teaching wisdom. When she returned from her relaxed, altered state, Anita was deeply affected by her mystical experience. Some very interesting changes resulted. The powerlessness she felt began to diminish. Her depression gradually lifted, and now that she has had her own experience of truth, she feels less oppressed by her perception of traditional Catholic values. She is more confident and is redefining her relationship with her father, a task which she has undertaken with gusto. She feels more love toward him now, because her regression experience allowed her to understand deeply the important role love plays in grace.
For the lady in Cleveland, the acceptance of the idea that hypnosis can heal might be equally dramatic. For many of us, the regression experience includes the realization that something you were told when you were young just isn't true. But when you accept the truth, life's possibilities seem to expand.
A few months before Many Lives, Many Masters was published, I went to an acupuncturist because of a chronic back and neck pain. The sessions were conducted in silence, and I used this quiet time to meditate. An hour into my third session, I had reached a very deep state of relaxation. I was suddenly startled by an awareness of a scene from another time. I was awake, not sleeping. I knew where my body was, but I was watching and re-experiencing a movie beyond my mind. In this scene, I was taller and thinner, with a small, dark, pointed beard. Wearing a multicolored robe, I was standing on an outside level of a strange building. I was examining the plants. Looking into the eyes of this thin man, I knew that I was this person. I felt his emotions. I could see through his eyes. I did not know if this was a fantasy or not, but I kept watching, observing, witnessing it. It was an ancient time. The man was a priest, a powerful member of the religious hierarchy. The building was distinctly geometric, flat on top with a larger wide bottom and sloping sides. There were 7 or 8 levels, with plants growing on and over the sides. Wide, vertical stairs connected the levels at certain points. I saw myself examining the plants, and I was thinking that they seemed tropical, but they were not plants found in Miami. Many were large and green, and I had never seen them before. Gradually I became aware of a word in my mind, ziggurat. I did not know what this word meant. I looked back again at the priest. I became aware of his life. I became aware that his earlier idealism and spirituality had given way to material values. This had happened as he had ascended into a position of great power and authority. He even had the ear of the royal family. Instead of using his position to promote spiritual values, peacefulness, and brotherhood in his people, he used his power for greed and sex. He used it to gain even more power. I felt sad. What a waste. The priest died as an old man, never recapturing the virtues and idealism of his youth. A great opportunity had been wasted. Later that evening, I remembered that word again, ziggurat. I researched it in the encyclopedia and discovered that ziggurat is the name for a temple of the same geometric shape that I had visualized. Temples from the Babylonian-Assyrian era. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon is an example of a ziggurat. I was shocked. A few years after this experience, I had organized a 4-day regression training workshop for about 30 therapists from all over the country. We worked for 8 to 12 hours each day. Everyone regressed each other, and were regressed in turn. A closed system like this one, full of bright and energetic people, can become very intense. That intensity affected me. It affected me so much, in fact, that on the second night I woke up in the middle of a vivid dream. Once I was awake, the dream unfolded further as I continued to maintain a deep, hypnagogic state. This is the state we are in when we are just waking, but are not yet fully awake. This dream was one that tapped a past life memory. In that lifetime, I appeared as a prisoner somewhere in Europe during the Middle Ages. I was held captive in what looked like a dungeon. The room was underground and made of stone. I was being tortured for my beliefs, particularly for teaching about reincarnation, which was not accepted in this Catholic country. After several days of this torture, I died. When the dream ended, I was still in the highly creative, hypnagogic state. I remembered the lifetime I had experienced several years earlier when I was a powerful priest at the ziggurat and had abused my power for material gratification. And then a voice came to me. It spoke gently and lovingly, and told me that when I had a chance to teach the truth, I did not. And then, when I didn't have the chance, I did. The voice told me that I had died for my belief when I didn't have to. You could just have easily and successfully taught about love, it said. At that moment, it wasn't right to force the issue. The voice continued just as gently, addressing my current lifetime. This time, it said, get it right. At that moment, I understood that part of my life's purpose was that of transforming fear into love and wisdom. I could not be afraid to teach. Hypnosis is the main technique I use to help patients access past life memories. Many people have questions about what hypnosis is and about what happens when a person is in a hypnotic state, but there really is no mystery. Hypnosis is a state of focused concentration, of the sort many of us experience every day. When you are relaxed, and your concentration is so intense that you are not distracted by outside noises or other stimuli, you are in a light state of hypnosis.
All hypnosis is really self-hypnosis, in that you control the process. The therapist is merely a guide. One goal of hypnosis is to access the subconscious. This is the part of our mind that lies beneath ordinary consciousness, beneath the constant bombardment of thoughts, feelings, outside stimuli, and other assaults on our awareness. In the subconscious mind, mental processes occur without our conscious perception of them. We experience moments of intuition, wisdom, and creative ideas when these subconscious processes flash into our conscious awareness. The subconscious is not limited by our imposed boundaries of logic, space, and time. It can remember everything from any time. It can transmit creative solutions to our problems. It can transcend the ordinary to touch upon a wisdom far beyond our everyday capabilities. Hypnosis accesses the wisdom of the subconscious in a focused way in order to achieve healing. We are in hypnosis whenever the usual relationship between the conscious and subconscious mind is reconfigured so that the subconscious plays a more dominant role. There are a broad spectrum of hypnotic techniques that are designed to tap into a variety of hypnotic states from light to deep levels. When you're hypnotized, you are not asleep. Your conscious mind is always aware of what you are experiencing while you are hypnotized. Despite the deep subconscious contact, your mind can comment, criticize, and censor. You are always in control of what you say. Hypnosis is not a truth serum. You do not enter a time machine and suddenly find yourself transported to another time and place with no awareness of the present. Some people in hypnosis watch the past as if they are observing a movie. Others are more vividly involved with more emotional reactions. Still others feel things more than they see them. Sometimes the predominant reaction is that of hearing or even smelling. Afterwards, the person remembers everything experienced during the hypnosis session. Listening to someone's guiding voice aids in focusing concentration and helps a patient to reach a deeper level of hypnosis and relaxation. There is no danger. You are in complete control. Your mind is always aware and observing. This is why people who may be deeply hypnotized and actively involved in a childhood or past life sequence of memories are able to answer the therapist's questions, speak their current life language, know the geographical places they are seeing, and even know the year, which usually flashes before their inner eyes or just appears in their minds. This is also the reason that a hypnotized patient who finds himself a peasant fighting in a medieval European war can recognize people from that past lifetime whom he knows in his current life. It's why he can speak modern English, compare the crude weapons of that time with those he might have seen or used in this lifetime, give dates, and so on. His present-day mind is aware, watching, commenting. He can always compare the details and events with those of his current life. He is the movie's observer and its critic, and usually its star at the same time, and all the while he can remain in the relaxed, hypnotized state.
Hypnosis puts the patient in a state that holds great potential for healing by giving the patient access to the subconscious mind. To speak metaphorically, it puts the patient in the magical forest that holds the healing tree. But if hypnosis lets the patient into the healing country, it is the regression process that is the tree that holds the sacred berries he or she must eat to heal. Regression therapy is the mental act of going back to an earlier time, whenever that time may be, in order to retrieve memories which may still be negatively influencing a patient's present life. They are probably the source of the patient's symptoms. Hypnosis allows the mind to short-circuit conscious barriers to tap this information. Repetition compulsion is the name given by Freud to describe the often irresistible urge to re-dramatize or reenact emotional, typically painful experiences that occurred in one's past. He discovered that bringing the initial trauma to consciousness, cathartically releasing it and integrating what had been felt and learned is effective. Hypnotic regression therapy, performed by a skilled therapist, first puts the patient in a hypnotic state and then gives the patient the tools needed to bring an incident like this to light. Often, the incident occurred during childhood. This is standard psychoanalytic theory. But, as I discovered while treating Catherine, the initial trauma in some patients stretches backward much farther back than this current life's childhood, into past lives.
The best therapist working within the classically accepted limits of the single lifetime will not be able to effect a complete cure for the patient whose symptoms were caused by a trauma that occurred in a previous lifetime, perhaps hundreds or even thousands of years ago. But when past life therapy is used to bring these long repressed memories to awareness, improvement in the current symptoms is usually swift and dramatic. A pattern of compulsive sexual acting out would be one example of a repetition compulsion syndrome.
I know of a young man who is compulsively driven by a form of exhibitionism, specifically of exposing his genitalia to certain women while masturbating in a car. This behavior is obviously dangerous and destructive. This young man has outraged women, and he has been arrested several times. Yet his destructive compulsion continues to occur. His therapist has traced the origins of this behavior back to sexual incidents that occurred between this man and his mother when he was quite young. This excellent therapist had success in uncovering an early trauma, but this man's therapy had been successful only in part, and he suffers frequent relapses. Based on my experience with over 300 individual past life regression patients, there is a good possibility that the reason this therapy has been only partially successful lies in the fact that the original trauma may have occurred in a prior lifetime. The scenario may even have been repeated in several lifetimes. Perhaps the most recent manifestation, the one experienced in his current life, is only the latest in a series of similar traumas. The recurrent pattern has already been established. All of the traumas, not just the most recent, need to be brought to awareness. Then complete healing can occur. The concept of repetition compulsion seems valid. However, the scope of the past must be enlarged to include past lives if uncovering the present lifetime sources proves unsuccessful. I am certain that the young man who is compelled to masturbate while driving needs to explore his past life realms, to identify the traumas, and to bring them into his current awareness. Only when the pathological foundation is brought to light can he really be cured. I have found that hypnosis combined with regression therapy plumbs the unconscious more deeply than do psychoanalytic techniques like free association, in which the patient remains in a relaxed but conscious state while merely closing the eyes. Because it promotes a deeper strata of associations by tapping memory storage areas unavailable to the conscious mind, hypnotic regression therapy offers many patients deeper and dramatically more rapid results.
It is important to stress that regression therapy consists of much more than hypnotic technique. Before the hypnotic process can be initiated, a skilled regression therapist will spend a great deal of time taking a history, asking questions, getting answers, and going very specifically and in great detail into particular areas of importance. This increases the success rate of regression from about 50 to about 70%. And after the regression is completed, after the patient has emerged from the hypnotic state, it is then necessary to integrate the feelings, insights, and information the session has elicited into the current life situation. This integration requires considerable therapeutic skill and experience because the material evoked is often powerful and emotionally charged.
I do not recommend past life therapy done by a therapist who is not certified or accredited by a traditional accrediting body. Non-traditional past life therapists may be less likely to let a memory evolve at its own pace and less likely to have the skills necessary to help the patient integrate the material. Experiencing a past life regression alone at home, however, is beneficial and relaxing in most cases. The subconscious is wise and will not provide the conscious mind with a memory it is not capable of assimilating. There is a slight risk of adverse symptoms such as anxiety or guilt, but these can be alleviated, if necessary, by a visit to a trained therapist. An individual who has even a slightly adverse reaction while working alone will simply stop the experience, his subconscious protecting him, while an untrained therapist might try to override the subconscious and push that individual to continue before he is ready.
Actual past life memories are accessed and described by the patient in one of two patterns. In the first one, the classical pattern, a patient enters a lifetime and is able to offer a very complete level of detail about the life and its events. The second pattern of past life recall is one Dr. Weiss calls the key moment flow pattern. In key moment flow, the subconscious knits together the most important or relevant moments from a cluster of lifetimes, the key moments that will best elucidate the hidden trauma and most quickly and powerfully heal the patient. With some patients, key moment flow has a fragmentary quality that can expand either into a more detailed key moment flow or a classical pattern in later sessions. Each patient's subconscious will determine the optimal flow of memory and healing for that particular patient. Past life therapy, which flows from key moment to key moment, is a very practical, successful therapy modality, one in which the necessary connections between past lives and present life may take place in perhaps less than 1 hour rather than in several hours. However, key moment flow tends to be less validationally oriented than the classical pattern because its focus is on essence, not details. No one can predict which pattern a patient will adopt. Both heal equally. And finally, not everyone needs to remember prior lifetimes through regression under hypnosis. Not every individual bears the weight of past life traumas or scars that are significant in the current lifetime. Often, a patient needs to concentrate on the present, not the past. Whether a patient wishes to cure insomnia, reduce high blood pressure, lose weight, or stop smoking, self-hypnotic and meditative techniques are enormously valuable. Whether they want to augment the immune system to fight off infections and chronic diseases, reduce stress, or achieve states of relaxation and inner peace, these techniques can be effectively used for the rest of their lives.
Despite the benefits, there are times when patients will nevertheless decline hypnosis. When I was a resident in psychiatry at Yale Medical School, a businessman was referred to me for treatment of his fear of flying. At that time, I was one of the few therapists at Yale who used hypnosis to cure monosymptomatic phobias, which are fears of one specific thing, such as flying or driving on highways or snakes. This businessman's job required a considerable amount of traveling. Since he would only use ground transportation, he clearly needed to overcome his fear. I carefully outlined the hypnotic procedure. I transmitted my confidence and optimism that he could be cured, that he would no longer be paralyzed by his fear. Not only would this cure greatly help his business prospects, I assured him, but he would be able to vacation at more distant and exotic places. His whole lifestyle and quality of living would improve. He looked pensively at me, frowning. Moments slowly passed. Why wasn't he more excited? Finally, he thanked me, but said he would pass on the treatment. This caught me completely off guard. I had successfully treated many patients with similar symptoms, and none had rejected my help. I asked him why. Didn't he want to be cured? He responded immediately, saying that he believed I could cure him, and then he'd get on a plane, it would crash, and he would die. I had no argument to counter this. He cordially left the office with his phobia intact, but he was undeniably still alive. I was learning more about the human mind, its resistances and denials.
It is well known that the mind can strongly influence the body, causing symptoms, disease, and even death. All physicians know of hospital patients who gave up on life for one reason or another. Despite the best medical treatments and technology available, these patients wither away and die. Patients who possess a strong will to live usually fare much better. We are just now in the process of defining the physical mechanisms of giving up and the will to live. These are the basic mechanisms of the mind-body connection. We will explore examples of the mind-body connection as it is made during past life therapy and different ways it can heal physical ailments. Early data from Stanford University indicate that support groups significantly increase the quality and quantity of life in breast cancer patients. Harvard University researchers have found that some types of meditation can prolong life in the elderly. In Head First, The Biology of Hope, Norman Cousins carefully documented work at UCLA and elsewhere, which has helped to develop the new area of medical research which examines the interaction between the mind-brain and the immune system. Dr. Bernie Siegel has also described mind-body correlations and the profound healing potential which is accessed through this linkage in both Love, Medicine, and Miracles and Peace, Love, and Healing. Research at Pennsylvania State University has shown that hypnosis can increase the quantity of certain white blood cells in the system. Numerous studies document correlations between improved athletic performance and visualization techniques. Many researchers and clinicians have used hypnosis to eliminate addictions to tobacco, food, and even to alcohol and hard drugs. Meditative techniques have also proven effective in many cases, and now past life therapy is added to this list.
Past life therapy under hypnosis can also achieve some of the same results. I have done hundreds of therapeutic past life regressions since my first experiences with Catherine. I have seen that physical as well as psychological symptoms can rapidly resolve as a result of past life therapy, even without the use of medicines. I am still not able to identify the exact mechanism of the physical cures that take place as a result of the therapy, although I do have some ideas. The cure might lie in the simple act of remembering and re-experiencing an initial trauma, just as the act of re-examining a childhood trauma during conventional psychotherapy results in an emotional cure. Or the knowledge that the soul never dies, only the body does, could be the great healer. Healing may also occur as the patient acquires an understanding of the factors which precipitated the illness in the first place. Or the secret may lie in a combination of all of these processes, all of which are typical of past life therapy. Although I can only hypothesize about the reasons that past life recall heals, I can attest to the results of that recall. In my experience, there is no doubt that past life regression under hypnosis can be an important part of the treatment, amelioration, and even the cure of certain chronic symptoms and illnesses, especially those affected by the functioning of the immune system and those that may have a psychosomatic component.
Past life therapy is particularly effective in treating musculoskeletal pain, headaches that do not respond to medication, allergies, asthma, and stress-induced or immune system-related conditions such as ulcers and arthritis. In some cases, it appears to improve cancerous lesions or tumors. Many patients have been able to stop taking pain medication for formerly debilitating conditions after they experience past life therapy. It also resolves deep underlying emotional issues, as the relationship of the emotions to the physical discomfort and its past life source is revealed. The medical exploration of this field is just beginning. However, it is safe to say that past life therapy must be seriously considered as a potent and cost-effective addition to the roster of effective holistic therapies, that is, therapies that concentrate not on alleviating a single symptom or condition, but on healing the whole person, body and mind. Wherever the secret lies, the therapeutic effects and benefits can be startling. Jack is a 40-year-old cargo pilot who wanted help with a cluster of physical and psychological symptoms. Physically, he suffered from migraines, gouty arthritis, and high blood pressure. Psychologically, Jack stored anger for weeks before suddenly venting his feelings in an intensity that approached rage. Jack also suffered from a very particular single fear phobia. Every morning, as he buckled himself into his pilot's seat and taxied for takeoff, he'd anxiously and repeatedly look out the window to make sure that his plane still had a right wing. Having been an Air Force pilot for years before he became a commercial flyer, Jack was an extremely seasoned and responsible pilot. He had never experienced any emergency situation that could have caused his current anxiety. Yet every morning when he woke up, all he could think about was whether the wing of his plane was going to fall off that day.
In therapy, Jack experienced a number of past lives in a combination of classical regression and the key moment flow process. In his first session, Jack recalled a life as a cowhand in the Old West. In that lifetime, Jack died when he was crushed by a falling boulder as he rode his horse through a mountain pass. As he relived the death experience, Jack recalled the suffocating feeling. As the regression continued, Jack moved into a different life and a second key moment. He discovered that he had been a German Air Force pilot shot down by friendly fire over Germany in World War II. The friendly fire had blown away the right wing of his airplane. Jack died as the crippled craft plummeted to Earth. As he re-experienced the death and the between-life stage that followed it, Jack also relived the terrible anger and frustration he had felt because of the mistake that had prematurely cost him his life and had forced him to abandon his young family. After this regression process, Jack felt elated, as if a huge weight had been lifted from him. Now he had an explanation for the irrational anguish he had been experiencing in his present lifetime. Within 2 weeks, he and I both noticed that his wing phobia had entirely disappeared. Finally, he was able to get into the cockpit without casting a terrified glance out to the right side of his plane. His anger about the pointlessness of that death also helped him begin to understand more about the source of his frequent rages. At Jack's second session, we decided to explore the origin of his gouty arthritis. Once in a trance, Jack immediately slipped back into key moment flow regression and recalled a prior lifetime when he suffered severe bilateral knee injuries from running into a low fence. As a result of this accident, not only had he torn up both knees, but he had also endured serious infections and eventually atrophy of his lower legs. He never recovered fully and required care for the rest of his life. He had become angry and depressed and had an early demise. Another connection between a current physical and emotional discomfort had been made. Next, Jack recalled an ancient lifetime in which an animal horn had penetrated his head, pierced the occipital lobe of his brain, and emerged from his body just underneath his right eye, the site of his present migraines. Since that session, Jack has not had another migraine. Although only time will tell if past life therapy has eliminated this chronic condition completely, there is a marked improvement in his level of well-being. His gout has also lessened. And much of Jack's anger has been replaced with peacefulness. His values have changed since he has experienced some of his previous lifetimes, and his perspective on life and its meaning has widened. Now that his fear of death has begun to erode, the things that previously angered or enraged him seem silly, small, irrelevant. This is a common result for many patients who have undergone past life therapy.
Selma is a 44-year-old woman who owns a printing business. Like Jack, Selma suffered from more than one chronic physical condition. Selma had a cancerous lesion of the vulva, which had been removed several times, but which kept coming back. When she first visited Dr. Weiss, she had been using a chemotherapy cream on the lesion with no effect. When they discussed her medical and psychological history, Selma related a number of physical and emotional challenges in her life. She suffered from allergies, skin rashes, and a history of stomach ulcers. At the age of 11 months, she had badly burned the skin on her left thigh and had received one of the first skin grafts performed in America. Selma had numerous childhood surgeries on her thigh, accumulating a total of 500 stitches. After an operation she underwent at the age of 14, Selma's body finally reacted to all the pharmaceuticals that had gone through her system by breaking out in an angry and painful red rash all over her body. After this, she became generally weakened, experienced more physical illnesses, and developed an intolerance to the sun. In addition, cancer ran in Selma's family. Her mother and her sister had died within the previous 2 years, her mother from brain cancer, and her sister from cancer of the pancreas. As a child, Selma had been sexually abused by an uncle.
Despite her many physical and emotional hardships, Selma came into therapy with hope and confidence that she could turn her life around. In her first regression, Selma saw herself as a dark-haired boy of 13, apparently a resident of a feudal village. Selma entered the lifetime at the moment of death, as armored men on horseback pillaged and destroyed her village. One soldier stabbed her in the chest with a sword, and she died instantly. Selma's spirit immediately left her body. As it did, she felt a wonderful feeling of floating, a feeling of peacefulness and relief at leaving that earthly existence. Selma then entered a centuries-ago lifetime in Holland and recounted how a relative living in that family's household had abused her sexually. She recognized that relative as the uncle who abused her in this life as well. The factual details of these memories may have been hazy and fragmented, but the emotional content of the memories was very vivid and dramatic for Selma, particularly the memory of the previous abuse. As we finished the session, Selma felt calm and composed, especially when reviewing the history of abuse with the Dutch man who was now her uncle. Selma experienced a great relief and clarity from being able to link these details together in a cause and effect pattern in her mind. As she discovered this pattern, she also seemed to free herself from some of the emotional residue of this traumatic childhood experience. 8 days later, when Selma arrived for her next session, she reported that the cancerous condition had improved. The formerly recalcitrant lesion had shrunk dramatically and had become much less sensitive.
Both Jack and Selma were able to make the mind-body connection through past life recall. Both of them discovered that past life therapy can not only trigger the amelioration of physical conditions, but it can also heal emotional scars. As the mind heals the body can also help heal the mind. Past life therapy also seems to develop those traits of hardiness which seem to correlate with good health, including increased resistance to the debilitating effects of chronic illnesses and strong immune functioning. It promotes happiness, peacefulness, and the tendency to accept obstacles as challenges and adventures. Patients who have undergone past life therapy to alleviate physical problems become more hopeful, and they live life more joyously and fully. They are more independent. They sleep better. Their depression lifts. Dana went to a small workshop given by Dr. Weiss, complaining of a problem with her throat. She explained that her throat felt lumpy. She often choked, she had frequent respiratory infections, and was losing her voice. In a group regression, she had a vividly dramatic memory of a male lifetime in the Italian Renaissance, in which she had been stabbed in the throat and killed. She did not know why she had been murdered.
After this workshop experience, Dana made an appointment to see me privately. In the office, she related a history of being abused by both parents when she was a child. In hypnosis, she again relived the Italian Renaissance death experience, and this time it became less dramatic. This is a typical reaction. Each time a past life is relived, the emotion becomes less intense, and the possibility of gaining insights from the experience is increased. During this session, Dana learned that she had been murdered because she had known some important secret that others were afraid she would reveal. She had not revealed this information, fearing the consequences of speaking out. This time, Dana continued on to a life review stage after the death was re-experienced. Here she learned that she will experience throat constriction and put herself in danger if she does not speak the truth. At her next session, Dana entered a life that appeared to take place on a Pacific island, Polynesia or Hawaii. In that lifetime, Dana was a young woman with psychic abilities who was absorbed with tribal dancing. She was so absorbed that when she was left to watch the fire, she neglected it. When the fire burned out of control, she neglected to warn her people. Her community was consequently destroyed. One of the victims was the woman who is her abusive mother in this lifetime. The theme had recurred. She had not communicated when she should have. After these sessions, Dana's throat symptoms improved. Moreover, she gained an important, wider perspective about her mother. She was able to step back and see her mother as someone with whom she had been playing different roles in many lifetimes. As a result, she was able to detach from the tyranny of the abusive situation in the present lifetime, one that had wounded her so deeply. This part of her past began to assume a smaller and less influential role in her present. Dana also learned that she needs to speak the truth, no matter what, that secrecy is harmful and hurtful.
The healing process that occurs during regression sessions is not always all-encompassing. Sometimes it is a simple matter of discovering the past physical origins of a present physical pain. A patient who does not need to explore complex emotional issues as part of the source of the current physical discomfort will not do so during past life therapy. The healing can be simple and direct. It can also provide the opportunity to be free from medicines, which can be as important as relief from the pain itself. Alberto, a physician specializing in radiology, had suffered from severe back pain and spasms for many years. Medical treatments had been unsuccessful in alleviating the excruciating pain. If Alberto had not had such a strong and positive personality and character structure, he could have easily succumbed to the addictive potential of the potent pain-killing medicines he required during flare-ups of his back pain.
Falling into a relaxed state, Alberto uncovered 2 past lives where he had suffered mortal injuries to his back. One was especially revealing. In this lifetime, as a soldier several hundred years ago, Alberto recalled dying painfully on a European battlefield, and he re-experienced the numbing pain of his fatal wound. The location of this wound corresponded exactly to the source of his current lower back pain. After the regression, Alberto's back pain and spasms quickly improved. Once again, mind and body had come together to facilitate healing. In Alberto's case, the result was more focused than in other cases. Alberto came to have physical pain relieved, and he achieved his goal. Although Alberto's results were very specific, they still influenced his life in a broad way. As a result of his past life therapy, Alberto was able to stop taking the powerful painkillers that had previously provided his only source of relief.
Patients have healed themselves of chronic allergies or respiratory problems through recall of a death experience that included the searing of the lungs or suffocation. Migraine headaches, asthma, respiratory infections, and allergies are physical conditions in the current lifetime which seem to have origins from suffering experienced in previous lifetimes. Past physical trauma seems to leave present physical residue. Lacey was a high school teacher in her late 40s with a long history of asthma and a fear of water. During her first session, she went directly to a death scene and found herself as a girl of 8 or 9, falling off a cliff and drowning.
Lacey recalled how her most vivid experience of this drowning was a sensory one, of the coldness and surprising depth of the water. Very quickly she began to float peacefully out of her body. Next, she found herself recalling a life in which she had been a young slave girl of 11 or 12 in the ancient Near East. In this lifetime, her task was to help make bricks out of wet hay or straw. Lacey died at this age when a wagon of wet straw fell over her and she suffocated. As she recalled the death experience, Lacey related the agony, panic, and terror she felt when she found that she could no longer take a breath. This death experience was quite different from the first one. Since that session, her asthmatic condition has improved considerably, to the extent that for the first time in her life, she was able to go through an entire allergy season without taking any medications or experiencing any symptoms.
There is more than increased strength derived from the clear awareness of our inherent divinity and the higher power guiding each of us throughout our lives. There is more than a physical boost from living life more joyously and completely with heartiness and power. There is also recovery through understanding the true root causes of our symptoms, our fears, our impairments, and our dependencies. When the core reasons are seen and experienced, understood and resolved, the symptoms disappear. The illnesses improve. The splinter has been removed and the pain is gone. The recurrent drama has finally ended. The dance is over. There's no need to project or defend, no need to anesthetize or use drugs. It is not necessary to be sick anymore. Perhaps this is why therapy conducted in this state, from this higher perspective, seems to be extremely effective. Anne, an intensive care unit nurse, alleviated her respiratory allergies with a past life memory that began to swell up spontaneously during a vacation. She was exploring Paris for the first time with her husband when she began to feel anxious for no apparent reason.
As her anxiety increased, she also realized that she somehow knew her way around the historic district she was exploring. She could easily navigate its twists and turns. Suddenly, as she turned a corner and looked down at a small square at the end of the street, Anne had an experience of déjà vu. She saw herself being burned at the stake several hundred years ago for her psychic healing abilities. She subsequently came into the office for hypnosis therapy to explore this experience. In the structured therapy setting, Anne remembered the scorching heat and how she had died inhaling the thick, suffocating smoke that arose with it. Anne's recurrent respiratory allergies hadn't been her impetus for entering therapy. The spontaneous memory had. But this registered nurse later reported to me that her allergies had shown a marked improvement as a result of exploring this memory. Sometimes regression to childhood or to a past life is not even necessary. When therapy is done in a relaxed, meditative, higher state, learning, acceptance, assimilation, and improvement frequently take place quite rapidly. The benefits of this higher state can be experienced in forms of therapy other than past life therapy. I have been incorporating some of its elements into traditional psychotherapy with some of my non-regression patients. I tell the patient to gently close his or her eyes and to take a few deep breaths, letting the body completely relax. We then converse therapeutically. The patient's vision is directed inward instead of outward. There are many fewer distracting sights and thoughts. Concentration is focused. The subconscious mind can be accessed and influenced in a positive, healing manner. Frequently, the patient experiences visual images which accompany the thoughts and emotions we are reviewing. These images seem to be very important and to be directly related to the symptoms or blocks the patient is experiencing. We discuss and integrate the meaning of these images, whether they are symbolic or actual memory fragments. Learning and clinical improvement are enhanced.
In a study reported in The Lancet, the prestigious British medical journal, medical researchers found that a combination of diet, exercise, and the practice of stress reduction techniques can reverse blockages in coronary artery disease. Changes in diet and exercise alone were not sufficient. Stress reduction was a necessary factor, more important than originally believed. Dr. Claude L'Enfant, a researcher at the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute in Bethesda, Maryland, stated that these lifestyle changes could begin to reverse even severe coronary artery disease after only 1 year, without the use of cholesterol-lowering drugs. Relaxation techniques are very important. In another study of more than 1,000 heart attack victims, researchers from Stanford University presented a report at the International Congress of Behavioral Medicine in Uppsala, Sweden. They found that anxiety, fearfulness, hostility, and anger are psychological traits that predispose people to second heart attacks. Interestingly, anxiety and fearfulness seem to be more harmful to women, while hostility and anger are more harmful to men.
Imagine relaxation, visualization, imagery, and regression used in order to eliminate stress, tension, fears, and phobias in a holistic way. The health ramifications seem endless. We need more research into the mind, brain, immune system, body continuum. How do attitudes and particular states of mind help to prevent, ameliorate, and sometimes cure addictions, chronic illnesses, infections, cancers, heart disease, autoimmune disorders, and other diseases? There is no question that the experience of regression therapy and hypnotic visualization can transform the mind to reach these healing states. These methods can be used in conjunction with traditional medical approaches and medicines. They are not mutually exclusive by any means. The transformational power of the mental attitudes induced by hypnotic past life regression and visualization should be considered very seriously by the medical and addictionology establishments. Here are safe and strong healing forces, forces with no side effects because these forces are basically spiritual and intuitive in nature. This is truly holistic medicine. In my experience, the need to protect the physical body from a previous experience of pain, starvation, sexual abuse, or violence is one cause of obesity that often originates in past lives and that can thus be ameliorated by past life regression. For a brief period several years ago, I was a consultant to the gastroenterology division of the hospital. I interviewed patients suffering from severe obesity prior to their entering a research program that involved an invasive procedure to promote weight loss. One of the patients whom I had previously interviewed was later referred back to me by a colleague.
Sharon weighed 295 pounds, and like some of the other participants in the program, she had failed to lose weight. Sharon had also tried a form of hypnotherapy that employs positive suggestions to aid in weight loss, but this had not been successful for her either. Traditional psychotherapy also proved unsuccessful. Numerous diets had failed. Any weight loss had been quickly reversed as her weight ballooned back to the familiar 300-pound plateau. In childhood and adolescence, Sharon had been only 10 to 20 pounds overweight. The explosion to 300 pounds did not begin until shortly after her marriage. During her courtship, she had idealized and fallen deeply in love with her husband. Meanwhile, her subconscious mind was denying some of his less perfect personality traits, such as his compulsive flirting with other women. Soon after they were married, however, Sharon could no longer ignore reality. An affair of her husband's became public knowledge, and with this disclosure had come the onset of Sharon's severe obesity.
Hypnotic regression revealed that Sharon had been publicly humiliated in early adolescence by a teenage boy who had made fun of her developing figure. This was progress, but there was more. Tearfully, and still in a trance state, Sharon recalled the original cause of her obesity. Her stepfather had fondled her when she was a little girl of 4. These memories had been deeply repressed for many years. The betrayal of her husband was the trigger, but the bullet was loaded at age 4 and the hammer drawn when Sharon was humiliated at age 13. She could not trust men. She had to be protected from them. The answer was to become so obese that no man could ever find her attractive, and therefore she could not be hurt again. After this hypnosis session, when she remembered her childhood sexual abuse, Sharon began to lose weight. Her voracious appetite abated, and she was able to eat sensibly. Short-term psychotherapy quickly reversed her distrust of men. Since our session, Sharon has lost 165 pounds and has maintained that loss.
Kathy was a 38-year-old businesswoman who came to Dr. Weiss for the treatment of her anxiety symptoms. Her physical health was good, except for the fact that she was 40 pounds overweight. Her panic attacks subsided after she discovered certain facts about herself during a past life regression, and flushed with success, she scheduled another session to see if she could do something about her weight.
In that session, she regressed to the life during which she was in a Nazi concentration camp. She cried as she saw herself as a victim of their inhumane medical experiments. But even though she died in one of these camps, the session was not over. She saw herself in New Orleans. She was a prostitute and was dying of a debilitating sexually transmitted disease. In both of these past life memories, she had died in a state of starvation. She was literally just skin and bones. Because she remembered the traumas of starvation, Kathy no longer needed layers of fat to protect her. She slowly took off all the extra weight and has started a wonderful new romantic relationship. Feeling good about herself and liking how she looks definitely played an important part in Kathy's ability to let this new relationship into her life. Gerald Kine, a prominent hypnotherapist, has treated literally thousands of people for obesity during his professional experience of over 25 years. I asked his opinion of these cases and others like them. He told me that in his experience, post-hypnotic suggestion alone is not successful in helping the patient achieve the desired weight loss if the patient is more than 30 or 40 pounds overweight and has been obese for a long period of time. However, he has found that regression to the cause of chronic obesity, whether that cause is found in significant childhood experiences or in the patient's past lives, does cure the condition. He has also found that when obesity is successfully treated with regression therapy, the weight loss is usually permanent.
Sometimes the tendency towards substance abuse is one that has been carried over from previous lifetimes, or the problems that a person hopes can be masked by using alcohol or drugs may be the issues that have been carried over from another lifetime, giving the feeling of timelessness and eternity. In either case, patients facing the challenge of recovery often have an underlying need in common with the obese, and that need is the need to protect. Like excess weight, drugs and alcohol can seem to provide a layer between the person and his or her feelings, fears, and the hurts inflicted by others. Drugs can also insulate addicts from taking responsibility for their lives because they can always blame the drugs or alcohol for problems. It is easy to use addiction as an excuse for failures, disappointments, or mistakes, instead of accepting such setbacks realistically and using them as opportunities for growth. In contrast to obesity, The motivation for substance abuse behavior often involves an element of escapism or avoidance. Substance abuse typically provides a method of suppressing memories or feelings. In this sense, the dulling of awareness with drugs and alcohol can be a form of slow suicide. Like suicide, substance abuse is a way of avoiding or escaping intolerable issues. Substance abusers who undergo past life regression therapy sometimes discover that they have committed suicide in other lives, and that the issues they wanted to escape from previously have resurfaced with a vengeance. This time, the need to escape has been translated into the slower suicide and escapism of addiction.
I rarely treat patients who are in the acute stage of an addiction to alcohol or drugs. Hypnosis is not effective when a person is under the influence of these substances. In this acute stage, a substance abuser should seek help from an intervention program or from a support group such as Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. Those who come to my office have usually completed the detoxification process and are interested in healing core issues in their lives. Often they have come to recognize that substance abuse is a symptom that has blotted out or provided escape from painful life traumas. These patients frequently recognize that their substance abuse was much more painful than the original traumatic event. Sarah had been an alcoholic for many years. She would also go on periodic spending sprees. However, she was not manic-depressive and did not require lithium. Careful exploration of her childhood revealed marked dysfunction in her family. She was involved in a classic codependency situation with her husband. Psychoanalysis, which had lasted 8 years, had not changed her behaviors. She had failed in group therapy and in a chemical dependency inpatient unit. It was not until she began to explore her past lives that a dramatic improvement began. She discovered that in prior lifetimes she, her parents, and her husband had repeatedly been together in abusive, alcoholic relationships. There had been violence, murder, suicide, and all sorts of chaos and mayhem. The actual details were not as important as the recurring pattern. Sarah resolved to break the pattern, realizing that the family would be condemned to endlessly repeat this destructive play until they had learned their lessons. Sarah knew that she had to forgive them and herself. She could only do that through love, and she did. Sarah now meditates regularly, volunteers with the severely handicapped, and no longer abuses substances or uses money for ego gratification. Sarah's understanding of the repetitive destructive behavior patterns in herself and her family, patterns spanning lifetimes, aided in her recovery. The experience of the extremely relaxed, almost blissful state induced by the hypnotic regression also helped her. She seemed to be talking to me from a higher, more detached, and more aware perspective. Sarah was neither angry, anxious, nor judgmental. She could clearly see patterns, causes and effects, roots of symptoms and manipulations. It was as if her perception of reality was much sharper. Ultimately, in both obesity and substance abuse, and really in any form of suffering, the mechanism of healing involves the process of getting rid of fear. The core healing mechanism of past life regression therapy is the transmutation of fear into love. This is the message of healing that those who have experienced past life regression carry to others and hopefully practice in all their affairs. How do you do it? By knowing yourself, by looking within and seeing clearly, by understanding and acquiring wisdom, by becoming more joyful and peaceful. This is the essence of any past life healing.
On the next tape, we will explore the issues of death and grieving, take a look at relationships, and probe the notion of your inner child. We'll also describe a number of regression techniques which you can use yourself at home. So let's continue our journey. Rena is a 28-year-old social policy lawyer. She was married to a prominent newspaper columnist in his 30s. Several years after their marriage, Rena's husband, Jim, tragically discovered that he was suffering from terminal cancer. During his illness, Jim and Rena had many arguments about life after death and the existence of other realities. Rena had a strong belief in both, but Jim was extremely skeptical. Trained as a journalist with superior reasoning skills, he had a professional bias for not accepting the existence of anything that he could not verify factually. Jim not only refused to consider these possibilities for himself, but he had also tried to wear down Rena's personal faith in life after death and the immortality of the soul, which was one of her greatest comforts and supports as she began to grieve the imminent loss of her husband. As Jim's condition deteriorated, their arguments continued. Jim appeared to become angrier and angrier, both about his condition and about Rena's beliefs. He also seemed to become more and more fearful. Finally, Jim was hospitalized. Both he and Rena knew his death was approaching quickly. Right before his death, though, something astonishing happened. Jim calmly told Rena that he had seen an old man sitting in a chair in his room, and that the old man had told him that he was there, waiting to take him on his journey. Jim added that Rena had been right about the subject all along, and that he had been wrong. He apologized for being so recalcitrant, and hoped she would continue to explore and learn more after his death. After he reported this news to the astonished Rena, this formerly angry, agitated, and fearful man became more peaceful about his impending death. Jim died the next day.
When Rena came to see me, she told me that she herself was very grateful to have reconciled with Jim on this important and formerly divisive matter before his death. The wonderful change that the appearance of the old man had wrought in Jim had also been healing for Rena. It brought her confirmation of her own beliefs, and to receive confirmation in such difficult and important circumstances had been a very precious gift. Rena's visit to me had many reasons. She was still suffering from some grief and anxiety at her unexpected and recent loss. She needed to integrate this important death experience further. Not only the grieving, but also the profound growth and healing that had begun to blossom in her at the same time. And Rena's visit to my office was also part of her fulfillment of the promise she had made to Jim, that she would continue to study and explore life after death, spirituality, and the immortality of the soul. Interestingly, Rena's regression experience did not directly address her relationship to Jim. Instead, her past life memory seemed to give her a message about another fresh and ripe new field of learning and growth. Rena regressed to a lifetime in which she had been a male Native American who had helped nurse and cure sick Pilgrim children in the 17th century. After the session, Rena recalled that as a child she had always picked school projects that had to do with the Pilgrims, and she had always seemed to know a lot about them. With the regression session completed, Rena felt that she had now experienced her own immortality firsthand. More significantly, the regression seemed to unveil heretofore unknown talents in Rena's own past, talents which she might be able to develop once again in this lifetime. Whether this includes health care, work with children, or a sensitivity to certain aspects of early American history remains to be seen. The subconscious inner wisdom that led Rena to access that particular lifetime might also be giving her conscious self a message that Rena herself had helped Jim face his dying and death. What is certain is that this session, intended to help her resolve her grief, had, like Jim's death itself, furthered Rena's growth and surprised her with yet another clue to her evolving understanding of herself. It had pointed to the many new directions and experiences that might still lie ahead of her.
Jim and Rena's experience is a very profound example of the potential for growth and healing that the death experience contains. Many of the dying report being visited by a guide or a wise person who is waiting for them. The alertness of the patient does not seem to be a factor. Whether the patient is alert or not, in a chemically medicated state or not, these experiences must not be dismissed. If a loved one tells you of such an experience right before death, you can let go of your doubt and feel fairly confident that the experience is real. Most physicians and therapists know very little about death, dying, and grief. Those who have experienced grief personally understand it a bit more, but in essence, most members of the healing professions do little more than describe the symptoms of grief. Grief can easily become clinical depression. The grieving person feels despondent, hopeless, and beyond help. Psychological pain becomes acute and omnipresent. Sleep patterns, the ability to concentrate, appetite, and energy levels are all disrupted. Friends try to cheer the grief-stricken, to distract them from their despair, but to no avail. Therapists and physicians can do so much more to help heal their patients' grief. Philip was a computer software designer who sought the past life regression process in order to heal his grief. Philip and his wife, Eva, had lost 2 very young children, a girl and a boy, to a rare congenital birth defect. Perhaps the most tragic aspect of Philip's children's story was the fact that the loss of a second child might have been prevented. After their first child, their daughter, was diagnosed, Philip and Eva had been told that the defect was not hereditary, and therefore there was no reason they should not have a second healthy child. However, this advice was inaccurate, and Philip and Eva had to suffer again the loss of a child, this time with the knowledge that the tragedy and their son's suffering could have been avoided. Feelings of responsibility, loss, and grief were inextricable and devastatingly intertwined.
The tragedy was several years behind Philip when he came for therapy, but he was still mourning. As a computer scientist with advanced graduate degrees, Philip was highly trained to use logical, analytic reasoning. He also had a strong Catholic background, and this orientation had made him quite comfortable with a full range of spiritual phenomena and experiences as well. Several times since the children's deaths, Philip had visited a famous psychic who seemed to be able to communicate with his little boy and girl. He had grasped at this opportunity to resolve his grief, and he felt that his sessions with this medium had been helpful. But the psychic had recently died. Philip felt that now he had no chance of contact with his children, and this lack of contact had deepened his grief. Based on the results I have observed with other patients, it seemed that a regression experience might give him a new perspective to deal with his losses. Philip proved to be a good subject for hypnosis. He was soon in a deep and relaxed trance state, and he appeared to be having a vivid past life experience. He described being in a beautiful alpine meadow, high in the mountains, surrounded by a profusion of wild flowers in full bloom. Suddenly he saw his children, now older, approaching him, laughing and singing. Then Philip's deceased father and mother joined them, along with his maternal grandfather, to whom Philip had been especially close. First Philip's children, and then his parents and grandfather, came and held his hands. Philip could describe the touch of his children's hands in his, how real the feeling was, how strong their grip, how much stronger they now were, and how much they had grown. Looking into his eyes, all of them communicated with him deeply. They told him that they loved him. They told him not to worry, that everything was fine, and that they were fine. They were very happy in this meadow and in this dimension. Joy literally sparkled from their eyes and their smiles. Clearly, despite the vividness of the surroundings, this was not a past life experience at all. In trance, Philip seemed to have entered another dimension. Even before we began the integration process for the session, it was obvious that Philip's experience had been emotionally cathartic. He told me how happy he was to have had this direct experience of contact with his children. As he described the sensation of their hands holding his, he literally began to cry with joy. Philip's experience in the meadow finally allowed him to release the guilt, grief, and helplessness that had burdened him for so many years. He gained an understanding of the immortality of the soul, and he began to anticipate a life of renewed purpose and optimism.
Critics may comment that reunions such as these consist of nothing more than fantasy or wish fulfillment. But fantasy and wish fulfillment do not produce the powerful healing forces that can take place as a patient reconnects with the eternal nature of the soul and experiences bounds with departed loved ones. Death is not absolute, and it is this knowledge that is the great healer. The loved one is not lost. After death, a connection to that person remains. People who have this experience or knowledge learn that death is less of an ending than a transition. It's like walking through a door into another room. Depending on the level of spiritual or psychic development or interest, communication with someone in that next room may be very clear or intermittent, or there may be no communication at all. Nonetheless, whatever the nature of the basic connection, it can be improved as long as the grieving understand that the separation is not permanent or absolute. The consciousness of the loved one has only died in physical form. This gives the grieving great hope for the future, hope that they will meet again. Of course, they may not meet within the same relationships or circumstances that prevailed in the current lifetime. For example, a father and daughter might meet again as friends, or siblings, or grandfather and grandchild. Nevertheless, souls do continue to meet again and again. Often the soul returns to a new lifetime with the same talents and abilities a person exhibited in a previous lifetime. Sometimes, people even access unknown talents in the current lifetime after recalling the existence of these talents in previous lives.
There are so many different levels of the self. We are wonderful, multidimensional beings. Why must we limit ourselves mentally by restricting our definition of ourselves to the personality and body that exists in the here and now? The entire spirit is not encapsulated in the body and the conscious mind. The part of the self that exists here is, in all probability, just a fragment of the entire spirit. No doubt the potential exists that even as Philip met his children in the meadow, another aspect of his sons' and daughters' souls could be growing and expanding further in a new incarnation. The versatility and potential of the soul are limitless, infinite. The mystic Yogananda has said that life is like a long golden chain floating within an ocean. It can only be pulled out and examined one link at a time, while the rest glistens beneath the surface, alluring, unobtainable. What we know now of death, indeed of life and the soul, is probably just one link in this golden chain. As we integrate our grief into growth, we will be able to raise more and more of this golden chain of joy and wisdom from the ocean of being and into the light.
Some of our more difficult and challenging life experiences occur in the context of relationships and families, and so do many of our most fulfilling and loving ones. We live in our bodies, and we express ourselves through our relationships. This is how we human beings communicate. It is our primary method of learning and evolving. Through his experience, Dr. Weiss has learned that many of the severe and chronic conflicts therapists see in couples therapy, marital therapy, and family therapy actually have their root causes in prior lives. Therapy that explores other lifetimes, in addition to the present one, can resolve relationship conflicts that prove to be resistant to the usual therapeutic techniques. When the search for the root of the problem or its treatment is expanded beyond the limited time span of the current relationship, much suffering can be minimized or even avoided. The anger, hatred, and fear in the current life relationship may actually have had its beginnings centuries ago.
Diana, a wealthy 40-year-old woman from Philadelphia, came to see me because of her chronic depression. As therapy progressed, I became convinced that a tumultuous and perpetually hostile relationship with her daughter was the root of this woman's unhappiness. My patient had experienced an instantaneous dislike of this daughter, dating from the first moment she held the newborn baby in her arms. Diana had not experienced these upsetting emotions at the birth of any of her other 3 children. Far from it. Joy and elation had been the hallmark of their births. Diana was perplexed by the instant and lingering anger and revulsion she had felt toward Tamar, who was now 18. By the time Diana entered therapy, the two had been arch-enemies for nearly 2 decades. Their relationship was punctuated by frequent, violent arguments that were usually set off by something trivial. During regression therapy, Diana related that she had suddenly gone into hemorrhagic shock and nearly died just before Tamar's birth. After this session, I thought that the relationship might improve. Perhaps the patient had nurtured an unconscious or subconscious hatred of this child because the birth had nearly killed her. This regression memory alone might have provided the catharsis necessary to release those negative emotions. At her next session, however, Diana reported that life with Tamar remained as stormy as ever. We tried regression therapy again. This time we were more successful. Diana's memories revealed that this lifelong animosity, felt equally by mother and daughter, had its source not in the birth experience, but in a past life. In the lifetime in question, Diana and Tamar had not been related. They had been arch-rivals for the same man's affections, and the man in question was now Diana's husband and Tamar's father in this lifetime. Clearly the arch-rivals were still battling it out in their current incarnations. Diana and Tamar's relationship improved somewhat after she had this memory of their past life competition. Diana did not tell Tamar about the episode, since she simply didn't feel comfortable about sharing this unusual experience. But when Tamar underwent a past life regression with a different therapist in another state, she regressed to the very same past life with the very same details. At this point, Diana was shocked enough to share her own experience with her daughter. With this startling and illuminating new perception, their relationship finally transcended the fixed script of endless competition and hostility. Diana and Tamar are now good friends.
It is through relationships that we learn to express and receive love, to forgive, to help, and to serve. We actually pick our families for each lifetime before birth. We choose to live out the patterns that will afford us the most growth, with the souls that will most effectively manifest these situations in our lives. Very often, these are souls we have met and interacted with in many ways in other lifetimes. We come around in groups over and over again. We reincarnate with the same people. The group can become quite large as the number of lifetimes increases, but the core group remains small and fairly constant. Relationships within the core group may change. For example, a mother-son relationship in one lifetime might recur as a sibling relationship in another, but the spirits or souls are the same. With regression experiences, recognition of the previous relationships can be brought to awareness. The subconscious recognition of a person with whom we have had a past life connection is sometimes manifested by an immediate attraction or repulsion, and by the repetition of old behavior programming from the past life. The behavior may seem out of context or out of balance in the circumstances of the present life. Hope is a 45-year-old woman who discovered that she had once known a close family member in a completely different, non-familial context. She went to therapy, complaining of a depression which seemed to be stimulated by the problems with her teenage son, Steve. He was a poor student at a prestigious private school. He was also occasionally truant. Some of his problems stemmed from a learning disability. He also had a habit of speaking angrily to Hope, not listening to her, and testing her limits. This bothered Hope a great deal.
Steve's problems did not seem inordinately severe to me. Hope appeared to be overreacting. But she felt she had to protect herself from Steve. He was depleting all of her energy. Both her depression and Steve's problems were quickly becoming more acute. Hope had become convinced that life was nothing but one long struggle that would always leave her anxious and sad. She was also becoming convinced that she had to leave her son to protect herself, that he was cheating her out of her own life. The relationship was permeating every aspect of her day. As a result, Hope felt exhausted, almost as though she were seeping away. She was truly at the end of her rope. However, as I interviewed Hope, it became clear to me that her feelings of struggle and hopelessness had not originated with her son. Her father had left the family when Hope was 5. Hope's mother had died when she was 7, orphaning Hope and her younger brother. For 2 years, Hope and her brother had been homeless. They cleaned and did chores for strangers in exchange for food and clothing, supplementing these earnings with what they found scavenging on the street. When Hope was 9, her godmother finally found and rescued the children. But when she was 13, her godmother's family fell on financially difficult times. They put Hope and her brother in state foster homes, where they lived for 18 months. Eventually, they were able to return to the godmother's house, where Hope stayed until she married at the age of 20. Hope's marriage had endured 4 separations. The family was still together. Things were looking up in many respects. When we tried to regress her to childhood, Hope had a great deal of trouble visualizing and letting go. She became so anxious about the possibility of re-experiencing childhood hurt that I decided it would be more constructive to bypass her childhood altogether. At this suggestion, she was able to approach the regression process much more calmly. Soon she reported that she was a young man walking down a city street at the turn of the century. Hope entered a small apartment building where she found her employer in that lifetime. There she angrily and suddenly confronted the man, telling him that she had realized he had been taking advantage of her, paying her almost nothing, and advancing other employees at her expense. Infuriated, Hope turned on her heel, walked out, and never came back again. This lifetime continued, but she never really found happiness because she always carried this anger, this sense of being exploited by her employer. Her perception and emotional reaction was that this had been a very intense and taboo betrayal, almost as though her employer had actually been her father. But he was not her father. In fact, it was then that Hope realized that the man who had taken advantage of her so completely in that lifetime had reincarnated as her son, Steve. After the regression, Hope seemed to see Steve more clearly, realizing that her relationship with him in this current lifetime is distinct from the one they had in the past lifetime. She recognized she had been overreacting to his perceived transgressions. Steve was not an employer intentionally trying to cheat her in business, but a young person going through a perfectly natural, if trying, adolescent stage. If he had committed any transgressions against her at all in this lifetime, they were certainly petty. Hope also realized that the themes of betrayal and being cheated were her issues, not Steve's. She understood that, in fact, they had cropped up very strongly in her childhood, many years before Steve was born. She recognized that not letting go of the anger she felt toward her employer in her past life hurt no one but herself, and that it was jeopardizing the joy she could feel from her relationship with Steve in this lifetime. We discussed the probability that her son's anger and acting out in this lifetime are related to her own behavior in the past life when she turned on her heel and walked out on him. Hope's therapy continues, and as it does, she continues to gain more insight into which issues are hers to resolve, that her anxiety and depression do not depend on her son. She has become more realistic and is gaining more perspective. I would not be surprised to find that she and Steve have shared many other lifetimes together.
Families, as well as couples, can be regressed individually, as in any other past life exploration, or also simultaneously to resolve problems they share, or to make a good relationship even more meaningful or insightful. When they compare their regression experiences, people sometimes find that they unknowingly regress to the same lifetime and found the others there. The improvement in relationships after such group regressions is often quite rapid and dramatic, similar to the improvement seen with individuals who get rid of chronic emotional or physical symptoms by regressing to the true precipitating causes of the problems, whether in this lifetime or another. In fact, some therapists who work with couples and families are already using regression therapy quite successfully in their practices. Adopted children are no different from biological children in this regard. past life regression sometimes gives great joy to adopted families by showing them that although they are not biologically related, and although blood may be thicker than water, spirit is thicker than blood. Some regressions have indicated that the bonds between adopted children and their adoptive parents may be stronger than the bond between these children and their birth parents. When various members of adopted families are regressed, they often recognize each other in prior lifetimes. If a parent-child relationship is destined to take place, and the physical outlet is blocked, another way is found for it to occur. Parent-child relationships are never random. To share many lifetimes with another soul is what having a soulmate truly means. A soulmate is often someone with whom we feel an instant connection, as though we have known that person for a long time. In fact, we probably have. We do not have to be romantically involved with a person to experience the satisfaction and fulfillment of the soulmate connection, nor do we each have only one soulmate. The popular Western idea propagated by the philosopher Plato, that each of us has only one perfect other half that can complete our own incomplete soul, is only partially true. It is more likely that we have a soul group that consists of many soulmates. This may be a small group of souls that gets larger as we collect deep experiences with more and more souls over many lifetimes. But the feeling of having known someone before, or sharing intense feelings and insights, is certainly not limited to one person. We can even have more than one soulmate relationship at a time. Our romantic partner may complete our soul in one way, and so may, in other ways, a best friend, a parent, or a child. A reunion with a soulmate after a long and involuntary separation can be an experience worth waiting for, even if the wait is one of centuries.
On a vacation in the Southwest, my former patient Ariel met an Australian named Anthony. Both were emotionally mature individuals who had been married before. They quickly fell in love and became engaged. Back in Miami, Ariel suggested that Anthony have a regression session with me just to see if he could have the experience and to see what came up. They were both curious to find out whether Ariel would appear in any way in Anthony's regression. Anthony turned out to be a superb regression subject. Almost instantly, he returned to a very vivid North African lifetime around the time of Hannibal, 2,000 years ago. In that lifetime, Anthony had been a member of a very advanced civilization. They were gold smelters who had the ability to use liquid fire as a weapon by spreading it on the surface of rivers. Anthony was a young man in his mid-20s. His tribe was in the midst of a 40-day war with a neighboring tribe. They were vastly outnumbered. 100,000 of the enemy tribe were crossing a large river on ropes, carrying swords and hatchets, as Anthony and his people spread liquid fire on the river, hoping it would reach the attackers before they reached the shore. To protect the women and children, Anthony's tribe put them in large boats with violet sails in the middle of a huge lake. Among them was Anthony's young and beloved fiancée, who was perhaps 17 or 18 years old. When the liquid fire suddenly burned out of control, the boats caught fire. Most of the tribe's women and children perished in this tragic accident, including Anthony's fiancée, who was his great passion. This tragedy broke the morale of the warriors, and they were soon defeated. Anthony was one of the few who escaped the slaughter. Eventually he escaped to a secret passageway that led to a warren of rooms underneath the large temple where the tribe's treasures were stored. There he found one other living person, his king. The king commanded Anthony to kill him, and Anthony, a loyal soldier, complied against his will. After the king's death, Anthony was all alone in the dark temple, where he used his time to write the history of his people on gold leaf and to seal the writings in large urns. It was here that he eventually died of starvation and grief over the loss of his fiancée and his people. There was one more detail. His fiancée in that lifetime reincarnated as Ariel in this lifetime. The two of them reunited as lovers after 2,000 years. Finally, the long-postponed wedding would take place. Anthony and Ariel had only been separated for 1 hour when he stepped out of my office, but the power of their reunion was such that it was as if they had not seen each other for over 2,000 years.
In I'm Okay, You're Okay, Dr. Eric Byrne explained that every individual was once younger than he is now, and that he carries within him fixated relics from earlier years, which will be activated under certain circumstances. That is to say, that everyone carries a little boy or girl around inside of him. This is referred to as his or her inner child. When childhood pain has not been resolved and emerges in the adult, it can produce a whole host of symptoms, including guilt, shame, depression, low self-esteem, and self-destructive behaviors. When people exhibit childish behavior, such as pouting, temper tantrums, and seeking excessive attention, the inner child is being triggered. If these triggering mechanisms are not brought into awareness, the maladaptive behavior that the patient suffered as a child can be turned against himself or herself. It can also be inflicted on others. Especially vulnerable are the patient's own children. For example, it is often found that an abusive parent was himself abused as a child. But sometimes the release of these emotional and moving childhood memories are not enough. Sometimes the roots of the pain go even further back. Linda is an attractive 35-year-old attorney from a small town in central Pennsylvania. She is divorced from a psychologically abusive husband. Linda came to Dr. Weiss's office well-dressed in a navy blue suit and an open-necked blouse. She wore no jewelry except for a large diamond ring. Linda seemed cool and controlled and effortlessly projected the image of a successful female professional.
Our first session got underway, and Linda recounted her history. I was surprised by the violence of her childhood, by the volcanic rumblings under that cool exterior. Linda had no memories of her life before she was 8 years old. She could not even picture what her parents looked like when she was young. The oldest of 5 children, Linda related how her father had beaten her with belts, fists, coat hangers, and wooden beams. He had frequently choked her, calling her whore, sleaze, bitch, when she was just a young girl. Linda's mother told her that the beatings had started at a very early age. At times her mother had joined in, beating her daughter and scratching her with her fingernails. Linda had also been repeatedly sexually molested by an uncle, with her parents' knowledge. As I began to comprehend the level of abuse this young child had endured, I started to feel a twinge of nausea. Even as a child, Linda had been so responsible that she had assumed the role of a surrogate mother to her younger siblings and had tried to protect them from being treated in the same way. As a result, she had suffered the brunt of her parents' abuse. Linda had even called the Child Welfare Department several times in order to get the state to intervene and to protect the children, but to no avail. Her parents denied all the allegations. Then, when the investigating social worker left, Linda's father beat her nearly to the point of unconsciousness. During her teenage years, Linda had developed asthma. She also had a chronic, severe fear of choking. She could not tolerate wearing anything around her neck, not jewelry, not a scarf, not even a sweater. The necklines of her clothes were stretched from her pulling on them. She could never button the top button of any blouse she was wearing. Linda had tried to run away from home several times, but there was no place to go. Finally, she went away to college and married at a young age to ensure that she would never have to go home again. During that first session, I began to try to unravel the threads of Linda's tortured history, but Linda could remember nothing before the 4th grade. I wasn't surprised. Such a memory loss can be a merciful thing, especially when the past has been so violent and abusive. But Linda was unhappy, frightened, and beset by a myriad of symptoms, such as recurring nightmares, phobias, and sudden panic attacks, as well as an overwhelming dread of choking and of having anyone or anything touch her neck. I knew we would have to explore her past. Linda came in for her second session, eager to try hypnosis. She quickly reached a moderately deep level of trance state. I guided her back to her childhood, and Linda could now remember more details of the 4th grade, such as her classroom and her kindly teacher. Now she could finally picture her father's face as he appeared when she was 8. She began to sob. I worked with the inner child, instructing Linda to send her adult self back to hug, talk to, comfort, and rescue the vulnerable 8-year-old. She was filled with fear, relief, and gratitude, and she was comforted. She attempted to understand and to forgive her father. I then used techniques I had developed over the years to help her release the fears, to see things from the adult's perspective. I used the methods of people who have worked with the vulnerable, frightened inner child. We talked, reasoned, felt, projected light and love, reviewed, cried, analyzed, synthesized, and rescripted. For 90 minutes, the cleansing of Linda's childhood continued. When she finally emerged from the hypnotic state, Linda felt somewhat better. She started to sing again, something she enjoyed but had not been able to do since childhood, when she had sung in the church choir. Her memory was somewhat better. She felt less anxious, and her mood was improved. But Linda's life was still filled with fears. She remained terrified of choking, and she still could not tolerate having anything near her neck. Her asthma persisted. We had more work to do. At her 3rd session, I used a rapid induction technique that produces a deep level of hypnosis within 30 seconds. Linda was immediately racked with sobs and began to arch her neck. She screamed that someone was grabbing her hair and pulling her head back. She said they were going to guillotine her. She had gone directly to a death experience. I assumed Linda was in France, but she corrected me. She was in England. This confused me, as I had assumed that guillotining only happened in France, but that evening I researched the topic and found out that for a brief time guillotining was also practiced in England, Scotland, and various other European countries. From the trance state, Linda watched herself being decapitated. She told me that she had a 5-year-old daughter in that lifetime, and this child was in the crowd, also watching. After the beheading, Linda's head was put into a burlap sack and thrown into the nearby river. We went through the death scene several times, lessening the emotion each time, until she could calmly tell me everything that had happened. Her heart was broken because she had to leave her young daughter. A few moments passed. I could see her eyelids fluttering, and her eyes moving under closed lids as she seemed to be scanning something. Suddenly she was sobbing again, thrashing her head from side to side. She yelled that it was him. It was her father. I knew Linda meant her father in her current life, a fact she confirmed to me after the regression was over. She explained that he was her husband, and that he had arranged her execution so that he could be with another woman. He had had her killed. Now she understood why her mother had said that Linda had seemed to hate her father from the moment she was born. She would cry and scream when he picked her up. She would stop when he put her down. Now it made sense to her. Linda remembered 2 other past lives during this session. Several centuries ago, she had been an Italian woman who was happily married to her present-life grandfather. She could vividly see herself in the boat the couple had owned. She was wearing a white dress, and her long dark hair billowed in the breeze. This life had been a happy one, filled with love, and she had died peacefully at an old age. In her current lifetime, Linda has a very warm and loving relationship with her grandfather. In a glimpse of a 3rd lifetime, she saw herself on a large farm with haystacks and a windmill. She was an old lady with a large family. I asked Linda what she needed to learn from these lifetimes. She quickly answered from the higher perspective of her superconscious mind, saying that she had to learn to forgive and not to hate. The energy of her hate and that of her father's violent anger was what had drawn them together again in this lifetime, and the consequences had been disastrous. But now she remembered. Now the healing could begin. Linda could understand why she had immediately rejected her father, and why he, tapping a wellspring of guilt, shame, and violence, had repeatedly erupted into a torrent of abusiveness. Now she could begin to forgive. When the regression was over, I asked Linda to button the top button of her blouse. She did so without hesitation and without a hint of anxiety or fear. She was cured. The cure had taken 3 sessions. Her symptoms have not recurred. Even her asthma is nearly gone. The intensive second session, in which we worked with and rescued Linda's inner child, was important, and it did help her. But the regression to the guillotine lifetime proved to have been the curative factor. In cases like Linda's, inner child work and the ensuing catharsis act as a doorway to healing that is best and most effectively accomplished through past life therapy. Traumas experienced in this lifetime's childhood are sometimes variations on traumas experienced in other lifetimes. These prior lifetimes may be the true source of this childhood's pain. Re-experiencing the source of the problem can heal the current lifetime's inner child.
The incidence of abuse against children in this country is startlingly high. Approximately 1 in 3 girls is a childhood victim of sexual abuse, and 1 out of 5 boys is victimized sexually. Past life therapy can be important to the healing process because for many adult survivors, it provides a rapid, safe way of unlocking and clearing the experience, and because it also offers a larger emotional and spiritual framework in which to process and integrate the memories and feelings that are released during the healing process. Past life therapy gives victims new handles and hooks for approaching and grasping their experiences. In the hands of a trained therapist, past life therapy for sexual abuse is not dangerous. In the therapeutic situation, no victim needs to be afraid of re-experiencing painful, repressed memories. Therapy enables the victim to comfort this lifetime's inner child. Many aspects of adult life, particularly relationships, are improved. The abuse need not occur in the present lifetime in order to influence the present lifetime's relationships. Dr. David L. Corwin, a professor of psychiatry at the Washington University School of Medicine, has observed that a profound sense of deprivation and of seriously impaired self-esteem frequently results from childhood molestation by the father. He says that those attitudes undermine a person's ability to stand up and protect herself, to feel that she has the right as a person to expect and demand that she be treated in a respectful, caring, appropriate manner. The women, he explains, begin to think of themselves as bad to preserve the image of an idealized father. They have to unlearn negative self-concepts to become a survivor in the fullest sense. Once the memories are accessed, the healing process begins. Some typical patterns of healing from sexual abuse are documented by Ellen Bass and Linda Davis in The Courage to Heal. The first step is to seek help. Victims often have partial or shadow memories of their abuse as those memories first start to surface. There is often a symptomatic inability to form intimate relationships, as well as a high level of discomfort. Frequently, the memory of abuse becomes more easily accessible during regression therapy. Victims can begin to become aware that the frightening elements of their dreams and daydreams and the tips of those elusive memory fragments are really all connected to the overriding childhood trauma. A subsequent stage in the healing process is the ability to accept that the memories of the abuse are real. Doing so is a vital part of the healing process. Hypnotic regression to this childhood and to other lifetimes is a technique that is ideally suited to accepting such memories. Patients see and feel their experiences vividly, yet they feel safe and are able to integrate their memories afterwards in the protected therapeutic situation. Seeing the past with hypnotic regression does allow some otherwise denial-prone patients to accept their past more effortlessly, thus speeding the healing process. Another stage of healing that survivors of abuse often pass through is the stage of feeling shame about their experiences, shame for participating in an activity that is taboo. But patients who access these memories through hypnotic regression are able to integrate more easily the fact that as small children they were never responsible for the adult's behavior. Past life memory also helps dissipate shame, as it helps explain why boundaries that should have been impermeable in these formative relationships with significant adults were broken.
This brings us to the highly charged subject of anger. Survivors are typically encouraged to experience their anger toward their abuser, to feel that this anger is healing. While anger is certainly a stage that must be traversed, I have found that when past life therapy is employed, anger is often rather quickly transmuted into understanding. In my practice, this stage is often comparatively short. I am not exactly sure why this happens, and more research certainly needs to be done. It may be that the greater perspective that is afforded by past life experience allows the victim to become more dispassionate more quickly. Or perhaps the spiritual component of the therapy can, in some cases, provide a quicker growth and healing curve. Not every individual who is undergoing a healing process needs to go through every stage in a rigid time sequence. It is not essential, for example, that anger be expressed for a protracted period even though your therapist may think it is necessary. After re-experiencing the visual and empathic review in past life therapy, understanding sometimes quickly follows. This type of therapy does seem to have a special facility for short-circuiting the anger phase. It encourages a patient to work at his or her own pace, whatever that pace may be. Why experience anger for months when you can rid yourself of it in an hour, a day, or a week? Through the understanding that past life therapy provides, anger can be diminished and the trauma can be more quickly resolved. This is not a promise of a quick fix, nor is it a scolding for patients and therapists who proceed at a slower, and in their cases more appropriate rate. It simply highlights another choice a survivor can make.
Once you understand the roots of your anger, you can choose to release it whenever you want. You can keep it, if you feel more comfortable about that for the time, but you can also let anger go at any time. The choice is yours. Everyone has his or her own unique and perfect pace of healing and growth. A patient who unlocks memories of abuse in this lifetime, and perhaps other lifetimes, through hypnotic regression, does not forget the memory of the anger. But such a patient seems to be much quicker to forgive himself or herself and others. A deep level of forgiveness often seems to be the spiritual lesson of abuse experiences.
Lorraine knew forgiveness was part of her lesson even before she came to therapy. As she sat in my office, this 37-year-old college professor and administrator recounted how unnurturing her parents had been to her when she was a young child. Her mother had suffered from a severe case of rheumatoid arthritis, and this illness demanded all of her parents' attention. Lorraine felt that her mother and father had both been cold and unaffectionate toward her. To make matters worse, Lorraine's father had died of a heart attack when she was 6 years old. Lorraine felt that her relationship with her parents and her father's death had made it very difficult for her to be intimate with other people, and also to be forgiving of herself and others. She was afraid that if she got close to people, that she would either lose them or become very angry with them. Lorraine had been a DES baby, and her fears of infertility played into this fear of intimacy. In past life therapy, Lorraine recalled a lifetime in ancient Greece. Her present father had been her father in that past lifetime, and he had abused her sexually in her early childhood. Eventually, he had been discovered and taken away. Lorraine thought he had probably been killed by the authorities for what he had done. Significantly, in this lifetime, Lorraine's father had also left her life when she was 6. Mixed in with her anger, Lorraine also felt a great deal of guilt that she had been the cause of her father's punishment in the Greek lifetime. She realized that in this present lifetime, she felt not only angry towards her father, but guilty about feeling angry. She could see that the pattern of abuse was in fact an old one, and that she had to forgive herself and him in order to let go of the anger. It was also clear that Lorraine's inability to forgive in other relationships was tied up with being abused by her father in her past lifetime. Lorraine recognized that she actually had to forgive her father twice for leaving her at such an early age. She is working on that now and is feeling much better about her relationship with him in this lifetime. Her feelings of both abandonment and anger are abating. She has come to realize that experiencing a fatal heart attack is not the same as being taken away for committing abuse. She believes that, in a way, he was forced to leave her again when she was 6 as a kind of repayment for the abuse he had committed in the other lifetime, and that, in fact, he had not wanted to leave her at all. She has also seen that the character of her father in this lifetime was a vast improvement over his character in the Greek lifetime. This, too, was healing. Lorraine has become very sympathetic and compassionate about her father's difficult path of growth. Her ability to be understanding and feel forgiveness came quickly, largely from being able to see her father's flow of lifetimes. Simply perceiving an overall purpose or logic to events that have been painful can be enough to heal. You can release anger and replace it with forgiveness. This process is not necessarily logical, but I have seen it take place many times. Lorraine is also now much less fearful of intimacy than before. She now knows that her father's abandonment and abuse took place in a very specific situation. It was not due to a defect or impairment in her. Therefore, she has no reason to believe that others will also leave her.
Past life therapy fosters greater awareness of larger issues and more complex and expansive situations. When the shadows are there and memories aren't clear, there is nothing tangible to grieve or release. But when appropriate memories are recalled, an abuse victim has a place to push off from into future growth. It is important for victims of abuse to remember that even in these challenging circumstances, the soul is never harmed. The spirit is indestructible and immortal. Although past life therapy can heal significant physical and emotional problems quickly and deeply, it is not necessary to have a serious problem to benefit from this process. Many productive, highly functioning people suffering from seemingly minor problems and worries can also profit. Past life therapy can unleash sources of hidden strength. Many people can benefit from the ability of past life therapy to pinpoint the source of distortions in self-perception, and in offering a direct personal experience of spirituality and higher wisdom. Past life therapy can replace vague feelings of lack of purpose and unhappiness with a new sense of serenity and direction. If you have a creative block, past life therapy can sometimes reveal the prior life source of the block. It also removes it, leaving you with a new avenue of creativity, empowerment, and play.
Sometimes past life regression is the beginning of a spiritual path that brings not only understanding and special talents to consciousness, but it can also bring peace, bliss, inner joy, and wisdom to the most mundane and unexpected moments of life. As an unforeseen result of past life therapy, many people have become oriented towards spirituality or metaphysics without withdrawing in any way from productive careers or existing relationships. In fact, the other aspects of their lives have also improved and strengthened as a result of their spiritual growth. Many of them report more peak or transcendent experiences, more intuitive knowledge that leads them to betterment of both their inner and outer lives. It also leads them to more peace, calm, and centeredness in their lives no matter what the circumstances. There are times when it is not necessary, or even recommended, to begin the path to inner peace with past life regression therapy. Sometimes hypnosis reveals a different path to be taken. Occasionally a highly functioning, happy person comes to my office because of curiosity or just for the experience. Often such a patient has excellent results. But sometimes these patients are not successful.
Frequently there is a reason memories are not forthcoming. Sometimes these patients are trying too hard. The very act of trying is a conscious behavior that can block the subconscious from coming through. This block is easily overcome, however, as the patient relaxes and becomes more skilled at being passively receptive. Sometimes there is the fear of reliving a death experience. Patients must remember that they can choose whether to go through a death experience or not, and if they do choose to, the majority of people do not find it traumatic. This makes the success rate even higher. But there are times when the patient has something more important to accomplish. Armando is a tax attorney from New Jersey. He is an elegant man, impeccably dressed and charming, his mind ever attentive and quick. He was not having any significant psychological or physical problems, but he desperately wanted the experience of a past life regression.
Armando was both serious and seeking spiritual growth and experience. His personality style bordered on obsessive-compulsive. He had difficulty relaxing and preferred spending leisure time alone or with his wife rather than with other people. Although always polite and considerate, he was not overly giving or charitable toward others. During our second session, I hypnotized Armando to a deep level. He experienced an ecstatic state filled with peace and love. He saw vivid colors, particularly purple, a deeply divine and holy color, a color which is traditionally associated with spirituality. But although he was trying very hard, he could not retrieve any memories at all of past life experiences. I gave Armando a regression tape to play at home. His wife, with whom I had not met, also listened to the tape. She had vivid visualizations of several past life scenes, and she recounted them to her envious husband. Armando had none. However, on the same tape, I instruct the listener to meet a wise person, a helper or guide, to ask a question of this person, and to listen for the answer. Out of Armando's purple light, his guide materialized. Armando's wise helper was a 19-year-old male with long blonde hair. He was wearing blue jeans and a lumberjack shirt. His name was Michael. The age, style, and dress of his guide were not those one would expect a formal person like Armando to conjure up or imagine. Even Armando was surprised. Michael was smiling. He put his arm around Armando and told him to lighten up and relax, not to be so serious. Whenever Armando listened to the tape, Michael would emerge out of this purple light and talk to him. He imparted spiritual advice, helped with practical wisdom regarding Armando's business and personal relationships, and made several accurate predictions of events which actually occurred over the next few days. But Armando still desperately wanted a past life regression. He partially minimized the beauty and importance of the encounters with Michael, his guide. Armando came in for his third session still complaining that he could not recall his past lives. He envied his wife's easy recollections. I hypnotized Armando to a deep level and had him find Michael. I told him to ask Michael why he couldn't remember his past lifetimes. Michael's answer was swift and to the point, as usual. He told Armando that he would be allowed to remember his lifetimes as a reward when he gave up his present fears. He told him that there was nothing to fear and that he should not be afraid of people. Michael explained to Armando that he should not worry about others, that they would be all right. Do not expect them to be perfect, Michael said. Then he told Armando to go and help them, even if he began with just one at a time. Armando did not really need to remember other lifetimes. His work is to be done in the present. Someday, if he is able to follow Michael's advice, he will be able to glimpse his past. But that glimpse will be a reward, a just desert.
The remembering of one's prior lifetimes is not essential or necessary for everyone. Not everyone has carried over blocks or scars that are significant in the current lifetime. Frequently, the emphasis is to be placed on the present, not the past. In his desire to remember his past lives, Armando nearly missed the incredibly beautiful and important meetings with Michael. Armando's experience also begins to demonstrate the unlimited potential and resources of the subconscious mind in the hypnotic state. In this relaxed, peaceful state, all kinds of things can happen. It is the patient who ultimately controls the healing. Many different types of psychic insights, perceptions of beautiful colors, feelings, and solutions to present problems may pop into the mind of a patient under regression. Experiences with guides and memories of past and present lifetimes may appear as well. A patient may even have experiences that seem to take place in other realms altogether, realms that are very beautiful and sacred. To see the answers to one's problems emblazoned in golden letters across a violet light is healing. An expansion of consciousness such as this is very therapeutic. It is a wonderful thing, and can be just as healing as past life regression. The healing potential of the subconscious mind, under the guidance of a good advisor, or under one's own guidance, seems limitless. We are all teachers and students. We are all patients and healers. The journey through time, into the mind, soul, and feelings, is one that we all share.
It is not always necessary or sometimes even possible to visit a past life regression therapist. I even recommend that my patients and those who attend my regression workshops augment their therapy or group experiences with techniques that can be used at home. The techniques I recommend fall into 4 categories. They include keeping a dream journal, meditation and visualization, self-awareness techniques, and play techniques that you can try alone or with a friend. All will help you relax and focus your mind, allowing subconscious information to surface. All of these techniques are safe. If you have a severe symptom or are anxious about the experience, you may want to begin your exploration by first consulting a trained therapist. Honor these feelings if you have them, but remember that the subconscious is very wise. It will usually give the experience appropriate for the moment and circumstances in which you find yourself. Even some of my patients with very disturbing symptoms have successfully used regression techniques at home between sessions. However, the therapeutic process is very helpful in its ability to integrate an important past life experience into your present stage of growth. Therefore, if you ever have an experience you feel warrants help in order to integrate it into your present life situation, you may want to consult a professional therapist. Explore, trust, play, and above all, be flexible. Allow yourself to be surprised at the direction in which your higher wisdom takes you as you begin to tap the many layers of your mind, body, emotions, and soul.
One technique you can use is to start to keep a dream journal. Dreams often contain clues about past lives. Not all dreams are Freudian dreams with symbols, distortions, and wish metaphors. Some dreams convey literal past life memories. Dr. Weiss has found the following method to be the best way to keep a dream journal.
Upon awakening from sleep, lie quietly and try not to move. Try to remember your dream. Go over it in your mind. Then go over it again, and more details will emerge. Next, give your dream a title, like Paralyzed with Fear and Running Without Moving, or Being Lost in Labyrinths of German Castle. Giving the dream a title will help to identify its theme and will enable you to organize by category for subsequent retrieval. Writing down all of the dream's details will ensure against the inevitable forgetting of the dream's content. Journal writing will also stimulate your mind to have better recall of your dreams and their details. The more dreams you record, the more clues about your past lives you may receive. Simply write a narrative, give the dream a name, and occasionally review the contents of your entire journal for trends or patterns. Do the details seem interrelated or random? Details of other places and times that can be integrated into a theme or picture may be giving you indications of the most important or relevant past lives for exploration, while the more random ones may be just that, random details, or else memory fragments that are not yet organized. When you would like to more fully explore a past life detail or theme, meditate on it. Focus your mind on it as if you were doing a self-regression. Visualize that scene, image, or fragment, and let it expand and move and become more detailed. In the beginning, it is common to receive a collection of past life fragments that do not seem coherent. The more you practice this technique, the more skilled you will become. In my office, I sometimes ask a patient to play the parts of all the people in his or her dream. You can adapt this technique to use by yourself. For example, if you have a past life dream where you are surrounded by an unfamiliar family, imagine and perhaps enact the roles of the father, the mother, the younger sister, or the boyfriend. What does it feel like to be each of them? Frequently, by using their intuition and imagination to play different roles and parts, people start to understand more about what their dreams really mean. You may come to recognize that one of the other characters in the dream is someone now in your present life. For instance, you might say, "This person feels just like my father." In using this role-playing technique to interpret your more typical dreams, you may be able to find the patterns reflected in your present life. Meditation, a practice I recommend highly, is another basic method for opening up your awareness of past life memories. Meditation clears the mind, and when the mind is clear, insights, perceptions, and perhaps past life memories may spontaneously surface. However, I also recommend meditation for its many other positive and far-reaching effects. Like keeping a dream journal, meditation is a technique that gives you a foundation of self-awareness that can be useful in many areas of your life. It teaches peacefulness and joy. It shows how to focus on the present moment and not to worry so much about the future or ruminate about the past. It can teach you to be in control of your mind and emotions instead of the other way around. The practice of meditation is much easier and simpler than most people believe it to be. The beginner's anxiety about doing it correctly, the right way, is what creates the difficulty. However, there is not just one right way to meditate. Whenever you are relaxed, when your mind is quiet and observant, when you are not reflexively engaged in thought, you are meditating. Great insights and revelations can occur in this state. Meditation takes practice and patience, but the very act of meditating creates more patience. As a psychiatrist, I know how difficult it can be to quiet the mind. Thoughts always seem to be popping up into our consciousness. As a matter of fact, most of us are not even aware of these thoughts, or that we are constantly thinking, visualizing, or daydreaming. In my workshops, I ask people to close their eyes and think of nothing for 30 seconds. No thoughts, no images, just a blank mind. Almost no one can do this. After the 30 seconds are up, I ask people to tell me whether they had any thoughts, and if so, what they were. "Why is he asking us to do this? This is silly," and "my back hurts" are common responses. "I wonder if I left my headlights on," or "I wish that person would stop coughing," are other examples of the constant inner chatter that floods the minds of my workshop participants. Try it for yourself and see. To meditate, find a quiet, peaceful place, and just relax and try to quiet your mind. Pay attention to your breathing. Breathe slowly and gently, until your breathing settles into a calm, even rhythm. Become aware of your thoughts, and then softly let them go. Do not judge yourself. Do not become frustrated or impatient. Just observe your thoughts as they pass by. As you do so, you will learn a great deal about yourself, and as you practice the techniques in this chapter and the next, you may access a past life memory. With time, meditating may enhance your success with other techniques of regression. Some people prefer to meditate by concentrating on a word, a number, or an object. Again, the specific technique does not matter. Some people prefer visualizing or picturing things in their mind's eye. Those who visualize are also meditating, but in a more guided way. Visualization can be used as a powerful healing technique to augment the body's immune system, accelerate natural homeostatic and healing mechanisms, and eliminate many types of illnesses. It can also be used to enhance a physical performance as a form of prayer or even to reach transcendent states. To discover a past life from a meditative state, visualize yourself in a different time. Let the images flow into your conscious mind. The material that comes up will be arising from your deeper mind, your subconscious. Don't analyze the images. Just let them flow forth and observe them as if you were a witness to the events or scenes they portray. Use your imagination. After you are finished, record your experiences in a journal, perhaps in a separate section of your dream journal. Look for patterns and meanings the same way you do when you examine your dreams. Self-observation is a third technique I recommend as a key to past life recall. Your current life and circumstances often contain clues to your past lives. So, when you're relaxed and have some free time, try some self-analysis. From a detached, non-judgmental, and uncritical perspective, observe and ruminate upon your talents and abilities. Where do they come from? Did you inherit them from your parents, or could they be connected to a past life? Take an inventory of yourself. Become aware of any fears or phobias you have. Ask yourself, where does the fear come from? Why do I have it? Did something happen to me as a child to cause it? Did I always have that fear? If you can't find a source for the fear, and you realize that it is one you have always had, start playing, dreaming, and visualizing, and you might find the source in a past lifetime. It's important to stress that to be successful in this exercise, as in all the others, you need to be non-judgmental and uncritical. Have you ever had a spontaneous reverie of being in a different place, different time, different body? This might not be just a daydream. Children frequently report such reveries, which might be past life memories. But many adults do, too. Have you ever noticed a particular unexplainable attraction to someone or a puzzling dislike for another person? You might have been together before. Observe your likes and dislikes, your clothes and your habits. What are your dominant personality traits? Look around your home. What art and furniture motifs are present? What decorative styles? Keep a clear, calm, and open mind as you look around. One patient of mine couldn't come up with any pattern to her collections. She denied having an affinity or attraction to any particular historical period or culture. It fell to the friend who had accompanied her to the session to point out that the patient's entire home was filled with 19th century Japanese art. So relax, and don't neglect to see what might be looming all around you. Don't worry about whether or not this information is real. Your mind is producing this material, and the exercise will have the same effect as dreams. That is, this process will stimulate your mind to render more and more valid past life material. Your aim initially is to open doorways and establish pathways. Later on, with experience, you can be more analytical. You'll know when that time has come.
Free associating with emotionally charged words and phrases is a play technique that might help you to access your past lives. There are certain universal words like war or animal or hunger that transcend cultures and lifetimes. They are fixtures throughout the ages. Peace, healer, and stars are also part of a list compiled by Gloria Chadwick in Discovering Your Past Lives. Feel free to add your own words or phrases. When you are relaxed, close your eyes and think of or say one of these words. Then observe the mental images, scenes, and feelings that result. Or tape record a list of words and play back the tape. Take your time, lingering with each word as the scenes and feelings arise and flow across your mind. Afterward, write down the images in your journal. Use them later to look for past life patterns or themes, or use them as clues for your regression and visualization sessions. For example, if you free associated with the word soldier and then saw yourself marching in the Civil War, you might write the image down in your journal and then meditate upon it the next day, week, or even months later. It helps to be open and playful when trying this exercise.
The technique I call faces is another play method to remember past lives. Sit a few feet across from a friend, with the lights dim and with soft music in the background. Look into the other person's face. Watch to see if the person's face changes. Observe and describe the changes you see. Features often do appear to change. Eyes, noses, and hairstyles dissolve and change form. Headgear sometimes appears. You can also try this exercise alone by using a mirror and observing the changes you see in your own face. If you notice a white light extending 1 to several inches from your friend's head, or even your own mirrored reflection, you might be seeing a manifestation of the energy field extending outward beyond the physical body. The only secret to faces is to make sure you try it in a dimly lit room. This frees up the left brain and allows easier passage of intuitive impressions. Faces can provide clues to many different past lives. As in other methods, meditation, visualization, and/or free association to the observed changes can fill out the memory. Let them expand and fill out without censoring the material. A face may become a group of faces, or a whole scene may unfold behind the face. You may hear a voice or an important word. Try it and see.
Visiting a reputable psychic who can also do past life readings is another interesting recall technique which can be very enjoyable. The psychic might be able to provide you with valuable clues, or you might feel something resonate within you as he or she speaks. Memories might even be triggered. A psychic reading is not as emotionally charged as a regression session, when your own memory bank is stirred and your own images and feelings flood your awareness. As a result, therapeutic change does not occur. Yet a session with a good psychic can be an enjoyable experience and some thought-provoking clues to your own past as well. Another method for triggering past life recall is body work. Some memories appear to be connected to actual areas of the physical body, a kind of cellular memory. Many people undergoing acupressure, massage, kinesiology, reflexology, and other methods of stimulating key areas of the physical body experience flashes of past life scenes.
A person who in a former life was lanced in the lower back, for example, might re-experience this traumatic event during a vigorous massage stimulation at the identical site in the current body. Sometimes the trigger site is in a different place, often in the lower legs and feet. The experience I had during acupressure, which I mentioned earlier, is a good example of this phenomenon. During one session, while the acupressure therapist worked on my feet, I had reached a very deep state of relaxation. Suddenly, I began to have a vivid and detailed memory of having been a priest in the ancient Near East. If you have such a memory, or even a fragment of a memory, write it down in your journal. Later on, you may see that it is part of a larger pattern, or you might be able to elaborate on it with the techniques described here. A final but important point. Do not be surprised if these techniques lead you to a place that is not a past life. When I regress patients, I do not know where their higher wisdom will take us. Often the destination is a past life or a series of past lives. But sometimes that destination is childhood, or a healing garden, or the mystical, light-filled place that seems to exist between lives. In every case, it will be your subconscious wisdom that decides the best place for you. Often, when conducting a regression, I feel as though I am only along for the ride. You may discover new places when you use these techniques. Allow yourself the possibility of being surprised by an unexpected experience.
Often, these are the ones that induce the most growth. Instead of experiencing a past life, you may go to a place and read the mystical records, or you may meet a loved one in a garden who gives just one sentence of advice. You may even experience other realities, other dimensions, beyond the traditional reference points of space and time. Let your growth evolve in an intuitive, non-linear way, if that is the pattern that it takes. As long as you allow yourself to feel playful and non-judgmental about your experiences, you will always continue to grow. Remember, If something comes up that really troubles you, you can go to a therapist to resolve it. Most people, however, remember experiences, whether from childhood or a past life or elsewhere, without significant discomfort or anxiety. You will never get stuck in the places you go. You will always have the option of opening your eyes or floating above your experience. You have the choice. Your subconscious mind is always in control. It is not going to allow something to happen that you cannot handle.
These techniques for recalling your past lives, or at least for being able to become aware of some of the clues and signposts along the way, are by no means the only ones. Studies have been done of past life recall that occurs during electrical stimulation of certain areas of the brain. There are studies of memories retrieved while on drugs or in altered mental states. Memories from comas, near-death and out-of-body experiences have been studied as well. There is excitement in this exploration and study. There is an exhilaration when you realize how much greater you are than your current confined ego or personality. The real you, the immortal you, is the you which is present from body to body, from life to life. How exciting it is to meet yourself.